You are about to listen to the Dr. Dahlia Show. Sassy, stimulating medical talk radio. Any medical advice Dr. Dahlia Wax gives on her show should not be substituted for an actual visit to your medical provider. And now, here's Dr. Dahlia.
We are back on the Dr. Dahlia Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877 Dr. Dahlia, 1-877 DOCDALI. So one thing that I find fascinating as it pertains to the economy is the anxiety that people get as it pertains to the stock market. Now, when I say interesting, it doesn't mean I'm happy about it, but it's intriguing how when people get anxious as it pertains to the stock market, it's not only when the stock market goes down, but also when the stock market soars like it's doing today. And there's a concept that I don't know if they necessarily have a clinical diagnosis for. I doubt it. I doubt it's in the DSM, but a stock market anxiety. And people are admitting that they get this even when the stock market is skyrocketing. And so what is that? Why do people get nervous even when their stocks are doing well? I think the answer is obvious. I mean, I know that I would probably feel this way if I had a decent amount of money in the stock market, is because what goes up must come down. And one thing about how the stock market is you have something and then it gets taken away. I mean, I grew up where, I went to 12 different schools. So as soon as I got excited about some friends or where I was or class offices, immediately, it gets taken away. I'd get in trouble. My parents would take something away. And so here you have NVIDIA or Microsoft or I don't know, Barrick Mining, which I like. I like that stock a lot. Or some lithium, whatever. And it goes up and you're like, oh my gosh, this is what I have per share. And you know that within seconds, it could be gone. That does a lot to your psyche. It makes you anxious. It can make you paranoid. And so seeing the stock market go up, when the stock market goes down, you're like, oh my gosh, it stinks. But the stock market going up, if you have lived in the last decade or two, now actually in the few decades, even with Black Monday that happened in the 80s, but if you've ever, seeing how the idea of, well, you just stay the course and everything's going to work out, you're going to be nervous. Just really quickly here, I think the NASDAQ is up 1.34%, about 352 points. Dow is up 1,080. We're going to be hitting the record 50,000 soon. The total Dow is at 49,650. S&P is up. Why? Well, because Trump had said, and we're going to kind of review some of Trump's tweets or truths on Truth Social, but he said that Iran has promised they're not going to close the Strait of Hormuz. It's now going to be open. We have made such huge gains, essentially winning. That the stock market has now just rebounded. Crude oil dropping, gas prices will hopefully go down as long as this all sticks. So that's great. But another thing that's causing anxiety as it pertains to the stock market is the concept of, well, do we sell? When do you sell and when do you buy? One of the biggest spankings we get is when we are told that you should have taken advantage of something when you had the chance and then you didn't. This is why I don't recommend anybody gambles, because I see what happens to people who gamble. They go, man, if I would have just stayed longer, I could have won more money. So I basically lost money because you didn't lose anything, because how do you know you would have won? Or somebody plays, they go up, they win money, they play the next day or they play later that day, they lose it, and like, well, now I lost. And so nobody wants to feel the loss. And so if you've been watching your stocks, Meta, for example, Meta went up really high, then it dropped. And if you're like, well, I should have sold Meta when I had the chance, now you feel bad. And how do you deal with that anxiety? Well, like war games, the only way to win is to not play. I don't mind people going into stocks. This is not an economy show. I have some stocks. I have some bonds. I've tried to diversify with the little money I have based after I paid off student loans and all the other financial commitments I had with family and all that other stuff. But at least, I have a little bit. in there. But what you have to do is when you go at it, understand that it's going to be a ebb and flowing. You're going to win some, lose some. If you have that idea of win some, lose some, you're not going to panic as much. One of my Facebook buddies had asked, should we sell? I mean, it's going up. I think it's going to go back down on Monday. I don't know anything about doing the short-term short sales and things like that as it pertains to the stock market where you only hold a stock for a day or two. I'm not that good at that sort of trading issue. You might be, if you're on top of it like that. I'm one of those ones that it's like, well, I'm just going to buy it and then hope, like in the 1980s, I didn't have money to buy Apple or any of that, so I'm hoping, well, any of these are going to be our Apple stock and just sit on it. And hopefully 40 years from now, it'll be worth something. That's my approach, which is a very bad approach as it pertains to stocks. But this anxiety that people have is, I don't want to make the wrong decision. I'm watching the stock market hit record peaks. Should I take advantage of that? Should I sell while I can? Well, that depends. Are you going to be upset if the stock market continues to rise and you sold too quick? If you're not, and you're like, no, I'm just glad that I got it on the upswing, well, then you're good. But if you're going to get depressed that you think you lost, well, then I would actually study the stocks and learn more. One thing about the pharmaceutical stocks, and everybody always asks me, what do I think about the pharmaceutical stocks? Lately, they've been going up. They went up precipitously when Trump made deals with pharmaceutical companies to start making the drugs cheaper. And now with these weight loss drugs, et cetera, you're seeing a lot of these companies like Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk do well. The problem is all it takes is one bad side effect. Or like we saw yesterday with the monoclonal antibody study as it pertains to Alzheimer's, where, yes, the medicine helped a little bit, but it was not as significant a result with these monoclonal antibodies that are supposed to, the antibodies find the protein in the brain, tell the immune cells to find the protein and then remove it so that it's away from the synapse. Apparently, they found that even though the concept of it is fantastic, in the clinical trial setting or in the studies, I believe they did like a meta-analysis of a bunch of studies, they were like, minimal. So understand if you're going into it that it's going to be very rocky. But if you're panicking because the stock market is going up, just learn about the stocks and understand that whatever decision you make needs to be based on the best decision you could have made. So educate yourself. This way you have no regrets. 1-877-DOC-DOLLY.
Hi, it's Mark Falter, host of the Financial Fitness Show. I strongly believe that no one should ever pay 1 penny more in taxes than they are legally obligated. Unfortunately, for most hardworking Americans, this just isn't the case. Why? Because most people spend more time planning next weekend's getaway than trying to ensure they're going to pay less in taxes. My financial fitness team has put together some materials that I know are going to help you. It's the Tax Savings Kit. Tax Savings Kit includes 3 things: free tax analysis, top 10 ways to pay less in taxes, and an investor's guide to taxes. Now, how do you get it? Simple. 866-764-2635. Again, 866-764-2635. I'm Mark Falter. This is Financial Fitness, making personal finance profitable.
Dr. Dahlia here. Are you tired, burned out, gaining weight, succumbing to the daily pressures of life? Well, how's your dopamine doing? How you feel right now, how you'll feel an hour from now, and how you'll feel next week is completely reliant on your dopamine. Our daily motivation and willingness to push through challenges depends on the intricate chemical process dopamine provides. Christian Kalikas and I created Deploying Dopamine, a book that tells you what dopamine is, when it dysfunctions, and how to successfully deploy it when needed. Find Deploying Dopamine on Amazon today. Check it out.
Increase fuel economy up to 7.9% with Hot Shot Secret Gasoline Extreme, the solution to maximize your engine's performance and fuel economy. Whether you're driving a sports car or a daily commuter, Gasoline Extreme is specially formulated with PEA to deep clean. Don't settle for an average driving experience. Upgrade to Hot Shot Secret Gasoline Extreme and go further on each tank. Order now on Amazon or HotShotSecret.com. Hot Shot Secret, powered by science.
And welcome back to the Dr. Dahlia Show, 1-877-Dr. Dali, 1-877-DOCDALI. Big thanks to Talk Media Network for making the show happen. Big thanks to Daniel, our producer, and big thanks to y'all for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter or X at Dr. Dahlia, Facebook, The Dr. Dahlia Show, and on YouTube, click like and subscribe. I am on Truth Social. I just haven't posted on that. It's a little, I can barely keep up posting on Facebook and Twitter. But we do have some truths. That's what they're called instead of tweets or Facebook updates or status updates on Truth Social, Donald Trump's social media platform. They're called truths. And Donald Trump had to make this social media platform because the media would alter and maliciously edit things he said. And with Truth Social now, nobody can mess with that if it's his platform and if this is what he is saying. So he has enlightened us with a lot of updates as it pertains to Iran. So I just want to read them to you. And I don't think there's any cuss words. So I don't think you have to worry about, the kids listening. So I think these are pretty good and pretty safe to read. About 3 hours ago, he says the USA is the hottest country in the world right now. Just a short time ago, under sleepy Joe Biden, it was dead, laughed at all over the world, but not anymore. Nobody's laughing. President Donald J. Trump. Okay, so that was his. Now, I think he's trying to show that he's hip, that he posts things. So every now and then he has to remind us about sleepy Joe Biden and how much things sucked. Interesting that this, Donald Trump, who has so many things to do and is so busy right now, how he has to take the time to do a status update, and post so we remember how bad things were under Joe Biden. I think it's remarkable. I like it. Now, then roughly after that, I don't know how long after that, he has in full caps, Iran has just announced that the Strait of Iran is fully open and ready for full passage. Thank you. Now, meaning he should say you're welcome, but I get it. He's thanking Iran. But the Strait of Iran, it's the Strait of Hormuz, unless he's calling it the Strait of Iran, which I think he would love to call the Strait of Trump, but he won't do that yet. But the Strait fully open, he said. Here's another one. Following that, he says the Strait of Hormuz is completely open and ready for business and full passage, but the naval blockade will remain in full force and effect as it pertains to Iran only until such time as our transaction with Iran is 100% complete. This process should go very quickly in that most of the points are already negotiated. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Now, interestingly, this tweet or this post sounds a little different. This sounds a little more legalese. So people ask, do I think he's really posting himself? On some of the posts, yes. Yeah, I think the one we earlier read about sleepy Joe Biden, and how much, we were laughed at. I think that was from him. This other one sounds a little bit more legalese, all right, which could explain why there's so many posts in a short period of time. Then, 2 hours ago, he puts that the USA will get all nuclear dust created by our great B-2 bombers. Now, what that means is when they demolish the nuclear capabilities, they want to make sure that Iran doesn't regroup that. He says no money will exchange hands in any way, shape, or form. The deal is in no way subject to Lebanon either. But the U.S. will separately work with Lebanon and deal with the Hezbollah situation in an appropriate manner. Israel will not be bombing Lebanon any longer. They are, capital letters, prohibited from doing so by the USA. Enough is enough. Thank you. Now, I thought that terminology was kind of interesting. To say that Israel is prohibited, especially when Israel helped the USA, although USA obviously really put Israel in a much safer position by doing what they did. But I think he wants people to see that USA is still in control of Israel. I mean, are they really in control of it? So I was a little intrigued by that sort of verbiage. But Netanyahu might be like, let Trump say and feel whatever. We're still ahead of the game. But if Hezbollah continues to attack Israel, I hope there's a way for Israel to still defend itself. More tweets. He says, now that the Hormuz Strait situation is over, You're going to like this one. I received a call from NATO asking if we would need some help now that the situation's over. Then he puts in cap letters, I told them to stay away unless they just want to load up their ships with oil. They were useless when needed, a paper tiger. President Donald J. Trump. Which kind of is unique. It is also interesting how NATO was not really there to help. You don't really see much of the UN or NATO do much. Now that things are at peace, okay, we're here to help. We could, no. So he called it like it was on that one. Then, a couple hours ago, he says, thank you to Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar for your great bravery and help. That's good. Then, here's another one. Iran, with the help of the USA, has removed or is removing all sea mines. Thank you. All right, good. They claimed they were booby-trapping the Strait of Hormuz. Thank you for removing the mines. Here's another one. This was an hour ago, or maybe an hour to 2 hours ago. He says, again, the deal is not tied in any way to Lebanon, but we will make Lebanon great again. Now, for those of you going, do we need to make Lebanon great again? Lebanon is in this position where Lebanon itself is at peace with Israel. Lebanon is not, they're not, I guess it's Gaddafi and all that. They've been fairly, keeping the peace. The problem is they're housing Hezbollah because of Iran. And so, now I think Lebanon and Israel are going to meet, figure out what to do with Hezbollah. If they could get Hezbollah out of Lebanon, then Israel doesn't have to attack Hezbollah in Lebanon territory. So that'd be very interesting. Then Trump thanks Pakistan and its great prime minister and field marshal. He says they are two fantastic people. Okay, good. Glad he will give credit where credit's due, which is important. Everybody thinks he's narcissistic and that he'll just say this is all me, me, me. He is crediting his team. So he knows how to work with the team. Okay, and then here's another tweet. A great and brilliant day for the world. Okay, good. And then he says Iran has agreed to never close the Strait of Hormuz again. Now that's interesting because you really can't trust the regime in its current state. But they say they'll never close it again. It will never be used as a weapon against the world. So that was a pretty interesting tweet. So then one of his latest truths or posts is the failing New York Times, fake news, CNN, and others just don't know what to do. Okay, now I think this is his. I don't think this is his lawyer writing this one. He says they are desperately looking for a reason to criticize President Donald J. Trump on the Iran situation, but just can't find it. Why don't they just say at the right time, job well done, Mr. President, and start to gain back their credibility? So what I find interesting about that is Trump should, in one respect, look like he doesn't care about these media. It's like, shoo fly, don't bother me. But he cares. I told you, this is something that I think he has been very transparent on in terms of what is characterizing a second presidency. I think he is furious that the history books and the internet that's liberally leaning and more biased is rewriting history. And however New York Times or these other people are characterizing what he was just amazingly able to accomplish is how it's going to go down in history. And I think that really, really bothers him. It really bothered him that a lot of his first term was rewritten and recharacterized when he did some really good work in 2016 from 2016 to 2020, including the Abraham Accords, including the economy, including border security. He did some good stuff. And you can barely see that on the internet or in the history books. So it seems like, again, he is really bothered that New York Times and CNN is getting under his skin. Don't let it get under your skin. He's right. They can't just say good job well done. And I agree with him. Why can't they? If he did a great job, if he was able to get Iran, I mean, again, we still need to figure out how to free, the people under the regime who are being killed. There's still work to be done, but for America and America first, It's to eliminate any nuclear threats and to eliminate nuclear threats on Israel as well, and to defund them and cripple them so much that they can't fund terrorism and they can't fund Russia and the Russia-Ukraine war. That, well done. Nobody could say that. So he's got a point, but it shows you what gets him. It shows us what gets him. 1-877 Dr. Dolly.
At Hot Shot Secret, we share the science behind common diesel problems and their solutions. For example,
diesel fuel cetane levels.
in many states, the cetane rating in diesel fuel is 42 to 45. Most diesel engines operate more efficiently with a cetane rating of 48 to 50. One treatment of Hot Shot Secret Diesel Extreme will raise your cetane 7 points, increase fuel economy, and improve cold starts. Due to a cleaner burn, there are less hydrocarbons and particulate matter in your exhaust. This reduces the blockage of your diesel particulate filter. Using Diesel Extreme generates 83% less DPF regeneration. The 6-in-1 Diesel Extreme formula also includes the most concentrated detergent on the market, lubricity enhancer, water demulsifier, rust and corrosion inhibitors, and a fuel stabilizer.
Hot Shot Secret Diesel Extreme is available nationwide at truck stops, fine farm and auto stores, and online at hotshotsecret.com. Hot Shot Secret, powered by science.
And we're back. 1-877 Doc Dolly, 1-877 DOCDALI. So many states, as of 2026, have increased sick leave and the ability for employees to get more sick leave. At least 1 hour for every 30 hours worked, or at least 1 hour of sick leave for every 40 hours worked. And we're starting to see more mandated sick leave. And the sick leave issue is one where I'm mixed on, because when I gave birth to my first son, I only had 2 weeks sick leave. And I could have taken unpaid and then extended my residency, graduation, and all that, or figured out how to bring him to work, breastfeed him, or just figure out how to make it work. And I did. And then when I worked in my own office, I only was able to take 3 days off with my second pregnancy. So I don't want anybody to have to go through what I went through. You need to take time, whether it's maternity leave or whatever. I think that's important. On the other end, it's not as easy to do because you have to have an employer pay for that person to not be at work. And so the more rules there are in terms of saying you have to pay not only for that person to be home, but now you got to pay for somebody to staff or man the position. Now it starts to be where the employer is paying an average of 2 employees for one person's work. As we have seen, that's not, boding well for many employers. And so automation, AI, finding ways to decrease the number of staff so they're paying fewer staff we're starting to see a big shift, not just because of paid leave or sick leave or whatever, but that's a big issue. When I talk to employers, they're like, every time somebody calls out sick, I am paying double for one person's job. And that, even though you're like, well, they're a loyal employee, they've been working for you for years. It used to be that your employer would have your back. Not all employers, but there was some sort of a family, some sort of I'm here for you. You could call me after hours, whatever you need. We will make sure that the business comes first. On the other end, I need you to have my back if I'm sick, whatever. And there were some people that had pretty good relationships. For the most part, there weren't. So labor laws and unions and things had to evolve because people were getting screwed over. But then once you made, these laws, then employers are like, well, then I'm going to follow them to a T. And so many individuals found that if they wanted to, let's say, work extra, this was before COVID, where if they wanted to, can I do a couple extra hours today so I can make more money? They were told no by the employer because if you go over to overtime, now they have to pay more for those extra 2 hours. And there were a lot of people not being allowed to work overtime and make extra money on the side, because rather than the labor law period looking at 80-hour weeks, it was a 40-hour week. So if somebody, let's say, was sick and missed 2 days the week before, and they were out of PTO and they wanted to make that money up the following week, they were denied, because then they would have had to be paid overtime. So, employers, if they're looking at the bottom line, especially small business employers who are on the verge of going under, it leaves the employees screwed. Well, what have some socialized countries done? So, for example, let's look at Germany. Now, Germany has apparently one of the most liberal sick leave policies. I believe the average worker gets 6 paid weeks off in a year. Now, in many other countries, it's 4. And I think in America, you have a lot of corporations that may give 4 weeks off a year. So you get 1 free month. For every 12 months, you get 1 month free. However, we're being told that Germany can't do that anymore. And in fact, the chancellor thinks they now have to make things a little bit more strict because of high absenteeism. So according to the New York Post, Chancellor Friedrich Merz is now looking at legislation that would allow employers to dock the pay of workers beginning from the first day they call out sick, which is a huge change from this pro-worker policy, high amounts of sick leave, 4-day work weeks. And he says, the chancellor says, work-life balance at a 4-day work week will not be enough to maintain our country's current level of prosperity in the future, which is why we need to work harder. They say that the average, there was a study that said that the average German worker takes 14.8 or 15 sick days a year. Now, that's only about 2 weeks. But they say they take time off more than once a month, and 4 times that of the United Kingdom. So, I mean, if you were giving them 6 weeks, I'm surprised it was only 14.8 days a week. I'm surprised it's not 45 days. So it shows people are not taking all the sick leave. But the bill is worried about their economic growth. And so they want to reward employees who take less than 5 sick days a year with bonus pay, 5 sick days, which actually I kind of like. Rather than penalize, I love bonusing, where the idea is this is your sick leave. If you don't take it, we're going to give you a bonus. I like that idea. Just like, with these budgets, I always see in companies, I saw it with the government, I saw it with academia, they're like, we got to spend, or we don't get the budget next year. Why not bonus the employees? If you're under budget, you get a percentage back in bonus. And you're going to see people will stop stealing white out and not buying things. And let's see how we could save money. Incentivize people. So that's something that they want to maybe look to do. They say Germany's generous current policy allows workers to take up to 6 weeks of paid leave for an illness. If you get sick with the second illness, you get a whole new 6 weeks for that. But the government wants people back to work, especially if they have a cold, etc. So they say it's certain that Germany has the highest number of sick days in Europe. Both coalition partners would like to reduce that. So they say standard work weeks in Germany are 5 days, but many companies are doing the 4-day work week thing, with them getting paid for 5 days. So, what happens in Germany doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate to America. But one thing that politicians in America have been pushing is look at Europe, look at their sick leave, look at their maternity leave, their paternity leave. We should do what they do. The only problem is if if our tax burden is different, if our it is different, and if you start to see that these other countries are struggling because people are calling out all the time and they're not coming to work, that's an issue. I mean, I see it in America all the time. You'll go somewhere and it'll be closed, and my husband will be like, "Why are they closed? It's only 3 p.m." I go, "No staff." I have to keep reminding him it's probably no staff. If there's no staff, they're going to close. If people call out, you can't stay open. And what happens if your business can't stay open? If your business can't stay open, you have to close. People always ask, my patients always ask, how come I see you answer phones? I see you. Well, because again, we have people that call out. And what was really interesting is that I told them that they could extend their sick leave or whatever, and we would give sick leave, but they would use their sick leave, and then when they didn't have any more sick leave, they would come in, and I would tell them, why don't we renew your sick leave before flu season? Because a lot of times what would happen is they would get sick leave and then they would use it all to take a trip, but then they would get sick, and I'm like, but I don't want you coming to work sick. You're sick. Well, I used up all my sick leave. So, expanding sick leave, to 6 weeks is expensive. But if somebody's sick and they don't want to lose their job, it is on us as employers to make sure that they could still work for us. You don't want a person who's sick not only have to deal with being sick, but then lose their income. But there's got to be a better way, because these employers can't afford it, and they can't keep running the business. I'll go to a restaurant every once in a while, and my husband's like, "Oh my gosh, the service here is horrible," and I'm like, "No, they're understaffed. See, they have 2 in the back, 2 in the front. They with all the tables, they probably have 6 to a station. It's a staffing issue. Same thing with hospitals. I remember working at a hospital. I was an ER doc at one of the hospitals in a small town, and the 2 upstairs floors were completely empty, no patients. Why? Well, if you don't have nurses, you don't have staff, you can't fill those beds. You can't put a patient in a bed with no nurse. Well, so a staffing issue is and have studies shown that the more sick leave you give, the more people will take off. In some realms, yes. In others, no. If they like their job and they want to work, they'll still come to work. But, if you're hoping that your employer is going to enhance sick leave, think again, because it hurts them and they might not care. 1-877 Doc Dolly.
Hey guys, it's Clyde. We've had a lot of requests for Ground Zero merchandise, so we put together an online store with a big variety of high quality items. I'm really excited to let you know about these things. We have a lot to offer you and your loved ones. In addition to our regular apparel such as t-shirts, beanies, hoodies, and hats, we've expanded our product line with posters, flags, aprons, mugs, and a whole lot more. We also have Ground Zero collectibles along with a limited edition of items like a Clyde Lewis canvas portrait, a Ground Zero embroidered jacket that will certainly make for great gifts and for interesting conversations with family and friends. And we now offer publications such as Ron Patton's book about mind control, MK Zine, and back copies of the official magazine of Ground Zero while it was in print. Paranoia, the Conspiracy Reader, also coming in 2023, are updated and revised books that I've written. There's a secure and easy-to-use shopping cart for your purchases. So shop today at our official store by going to groundzeromerch.com. Again, that's groundzeromerch.com.
Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Dahlia. As many of you know, I lost another colleague to suicide. And tragically, tens of thousands of Americans, including hundreds of physicians, take their lives each year. Why is suicide so common? Why doctors? Even medical students have alarming suicide rates. Nurse burnout is at an all-time high. Maybe it's the monstrous workloads we face every day. Maybe it's because of burnout, malpractice suits, online reviews. Medicine has changed so rapidly that it's almost unrecognizable to those of us who entered this field and wanted to take it by storm. But there's not a lot of resources out there for healthcare providers who deny that they are struggling or at risk. So my book, The Depressed Doctor, aims to change that for both the physician and medical student and anyone else who is struggling. Find The Depressed Doctor on Amazon or at drdahlia.com. And if you are currently struggling, call or text 988, the National Suicide Prevention and Crisis Hotline. Don't wait. The silence is killing us.
We're back on the Dr. Dahlia Show. So to Tylenol or not Tylenol if you're pregnant? That is the question. So years ago, we had spoken on the show how there were some studies looking at neurodegenerative diseases, issues with the fetuses if they were exposed to Tylenol. And years ago, study authors of these different studies suggested that we might want to use caution and not be so proliferative in terms of saying, oh, Tylenol is safe. You can have it like water in pregnancy. And we've known about that for years. In fact, when I was pregnant, I think I barely took Tylenol at all. If I had a headache, I might have, but I tried to stay away for the back pain and all the other issues I had because I even knew back in the 90s that there could be still potential risks. So to play it safe. Well, then, with the rising rates of autism, RFK Jr., Dr. Oz, Dr. Bhattacharya, and then President Trump had months ago a presser where they were talking about Tylenol, and Trump said, just don't take it, bear through it. I kind of disagreed with that approach because Trump is not a doctor, and if a pregnant woman has a high fever, high fever could affect the fetus, but where I stood on that is nobody should be self-treating if they're pregnant and have a high fever at home and not get examined. Get examined to figure out why you have that high fever. Is it because you have a UTI? Is it because you have flu or a kidney infection? So, my recommendation would be go to your medical provider, and if they want you on Tylenol, then take it. But to self-treat, without any medical advice, because a high fever in somebody pregnant needs to be evaluated right away. That's what I would have said. But Trump, just tells pregnant women you don't have to take it. Well, that caused a lot of criticism. And now we have a study saying that Tylenol during pregnancy has no link to autism at all. Now, I'm glad that they did this study, but I'm still confused about the previous studies and the previous data saying that there could be a concern as it pertains to fetal kidneys, ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, as well as autism. So the newest study usually takes precedence, but I just can't ignore the previous study. So I'll tell you what I think you should do. But with this study, which is very, very positive, it was published in JAMA Pediatrics. They looked at Denmark children. They looked at 1.5 million, and they analyzed 1.5 million children who were born between 1997 and 2022. And about 1.8% of them who were exposed to Tylenol during pregnancy got autism. But that was compared to 3% who were not exposed to Tylenol that got autism. So this suggested that there might not be a link. A prior study out of Sweden, according to ABC News, looked at siblings, finding no causal link between autism and Tylenol or acetaminophen exposure, or paracetamol as they sell it in Europe, during pregnancy. They said there are genetic associations and environmental triggers that are involved, but they didn't believe Tylenol nor vaccines were the cause. This latest study, according to ABC News, was hoping to smack Trump in the face. ABC News says Trump said with Tylenol, don't take it, don't take it. If you can't live, if your fever is so bad, if you have to take one because there's no alternative to that. And again, Trump needs to stay in his lane as it pertains to that. But I did appreciate the fact that they did make aware that there were studies and concerns with Tylenol. I knew about it in the medical field, and I would tell my pregnant patients. But apparently people were just shocked. They were floored that could be an issue. I'm like, but we've known about it for a while. In fact, there was a news station who wanted me to, criticize what happened. And I said, we've known this isn't groundbreaking. We've known about this for years. Not that it causes autism, but that there could be a link. And they were shocked. I'm like, you didn't know? When I was pregnant, I kind of avoided Tylenol. How come everybody else doesn't know? And now, because of politics, you're going to have this big push to take Tylenol. No. And I'll tell you what I think we should do. So what were some of the previous studies? So back in, I think it was 2021, I spoke to you guys about how one study found an increased risk of ADHD and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder with Tylenol use. Another one looked at what acetaminophen or Tylenol did on fetal kidneys, and their study authors urged caution in pregnant women with using. In September 2021, there was a study published in Nature Reviews Endocrinology. They found increased risk of neurodevelopmental, reproductive, and urogenital disorders with acetaminophen during pregnancy and urged patients to minimize exposure. Now, even if the studies are saying that Tylenol is not causing autism, which is good, and I kind of don't, and I've always said I didn't believe that all these rising autism cases were because of Tylenol. Now, I think there's something more to it. There's something else causing the autism. But these studies are suggesting that there still could be negative effects on the fetuses. So even though the study is like, no autism, you're all good, Trump's wrong, we still have other studies. So the study authors back in 2021 said that we recommend that pregnant women should be cautioned at the beginning of pregnancy to forego acetaminophen, Tylenol, unless its use is medically indicated. They said consult with a physician or pharmacist if they are uncertain whether use is indicated and before using on a long-term basis, and minimize exposure by using the lowest effective dose for the shortest possible time. This was in 2021, before the Trump press release years later. They said we suggest specific actions to implement these recommendations. The consensus statement reflects our concerns and is currently supported by 91 scientists, clinicians, and public health professionals across the globe. So here you have study authors, and you have 91. I mean, across the globe, you have all these doctors and public health officials saying use caution with it. And so even though this latest study is talking about autism specifically, I would still use caution as it pertains to an over-the-counter Tylenol medication. If you need it and your doctor says you need to take it, you take it. But if you are like, I don't feel good and I don't have time to go to the doctor, so I'm just going to treat myself, I would consult a medical provider. And when you're pregnant, for me, I got headaches, back pain, hip pain. I worked through it. I took hot baths and things like that. And although you couldn't be in the jacuzzi for too long because the heat could bother the baby. But, and I mean, I got through it, but I don't want anybody having a high fever and bearing through it like Trump said. You really need, if you have a high fever, to get seen. Because that high fever suggests you're sick and you have something. Your fever is a medication. Your fever is your body's natural medicine. I had another mom who said, yeah, my kid had a fever of 100, so I gave him Tylenol, and then I gave him Motrin. It went down, and then a few hours later, it peaked back up, so I squashed it again with the Tylenol and the Motrin, and then the next day, the fever came back, so again, I tried to stomp it out with the Tylenol, and I go, the fever is trying to save your child's life. We don't want a high fever. We don't want somebody to precipitously rise in temperature because that could cause a febrile seizure. But what we advise is you get them examined so you know why they have a fever. If they have a bacterial infection or an ear infection or flu, we have medicine for that. But the fever is the child's natural medicine. So you're frustrated that the child is still sick, and it's because you squashed their low-grade fever and wouldn't let it try to fight the body. That's why and so somehow, parents, probably because of febrile seizures, somehow got the idea that if their child has at all a degree increase in temperature, that they need to squash it with over-the-counter antipyretics. And it, we really need to get the child examined and then decide what the safest thing is. When I get a fever, if it's low grade or whatever, I let that fever work. 1-877-Doc-Dolly.
Looking for an easy read that can actually help secure someone's future? Pick up a copy of Mark Falter's book, Common Sense Income Strategies. For the past 30-plus years, Mark has helped thousands of hardworking Americans secure their financial future by using strategies that continue to create wealth, whether the market is up or down. Strategies that will make perfect sense once you take the time to read this powerful book. Common Sense Income Strategies brings to you what Mark has been teaching in person and talking about on the radio for decades. It's not rocket science, it's a pretty easy read. You've worked too long and too hard not to see the fruits of your labor. Common Sense Income Strategies is available now on Amazon or by calling 866-764-2635. That's 866-764-2635. Common Sense Income Strategies by Financial Fitness Show host Mark Falter. Secure your financial future today.